give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. Here endeth the gospel for today. We confess the words of the Nicene Creed. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, begotten of his Father before all worlds, God of God, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, not made, being of one substance with the Father, by whom all things were made, who for us men and for our salvation came down from heaven, and was incarnate by the Holy Ghost of the Virgin Mary, and was made man, and was crucified also for us under Pontius Pilate. He suffered and was buried, and the third day he rose again according to the Scriptures, and ascended into heaven, and sitteth on the right hand of the Father. And he shall come again with glory to judge both the quick and the dead, whose kingdom shall have no end. And I believe in the Holy Ghost, the Lord and giver of life, who proceeded from the Father and the Son, who with the Father and the Son together is worshipped and glorified, who spake by the prophets. And I believe one holy Christian and apostolic church. I acknowledge one baptism for the remission of sins, and I look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. Amen. We sing the royal banners. Please be seated. Readings today from the Song of Solomon that are the basis for our sermon about the apple tree. And the first part of the reading is from the second chapter, beginning at the first verse. which says, I am the rose of Sharon, and the lily of the valleys, and the lily among thorns. So is my love among the daughters. As the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Stay me with flagons, comfort me with apples, for I am sick of love. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand doth embrace me. I charge you, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, by the roes and by the hinds of the field, that ye stir not up, nor awaken my love, till he please. And then from the 8th chapter, the 5th verse. Who is this that cometh up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? I raised thee up under the apple tree, where thy mother brought thee forth. There she brought thee forth that bare thee. Here ends the readings. Well, in 1942, Glenn Miller sang, "Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me." And it was one of the top hits of that year, and it was made even more popular by the Andrews Sisters, who also sang that same song in that year. It appeared in films. It's about a soldier who wants the girl that he cares about to stay away from the apple tree. And if you didn't get the sense of the song, it's in one of the following lines gives it, where he sings, don't go walking down Lover's Lane with anyone else but me. That apple tree symbolizes romantic love, and their gathering beneath the tree symbolizes that romantic love. And I'm not sure whether Miller intended this or not, but he is echoing what Solomon writes about in his Song of Songs. I mentioned to you, let's see, it comes up twice, the apple tree in our verses. Verse 3, as the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. In other words, this is the bride talking, and Solomon is to her like an apple tree. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste, she says. In the 8th chapter, who is this that cometh up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? I raised thee up under the apple tree. There thy mother brought thee forth. So it's a place where babies are born. There she brought thee forth and bare thee. What is it with apples and love songs? I'm not sure I entirely understand it. The apple in the Bible presents itself as a bit of a mystery, and we're going to be exploring that mystery as we talk about the passages that mention the apple and the apple tree in the scriptures. Now, let's start at the beginning, right? Everybody knows that the fruit that Adam and Eve ate was from the apple tree, right? Everybody knows that. That's always what's in the pictures. That's how it's depicted. And yet, in an earlier sermon, I presented this fact that the fruit tree that is mentioned in the passage is actually the fig tree and not an apple tree. So where does this tradition, this long-standing tradition, where does it come from that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was an apple tree? Well, it comes to us as a trick of the Latin language, which means this is something that came up either in the the late years of the early church or the medieval church. And this is the trick. You got to know a little bit about the words to understand what happens. The word apple in Latin is malum. Malum. The word for evil in Latin is malum. Isn't that remarkable? That the same spelling for apple and evil comes up in the Latin language. And so when the medieval people were reading in their Bibles, their Latin Bibles, about the tree of the knowledge of good and apple, or evil, that conjured up in their minds that that tree must have been an apple tree. And that's how the artists have depicted it for us for centuries and centuries. And if that's not confusing enough, that word apple in the medieval languages tended to be used for any fruit that was foreign and not recognized. For example, they talk about the apple that it's actually a banana. Because the banana was a foreign fruit to the Europeans. When they first saw the banana, they called it an apple. Now, you're thinking, how does this happen? This doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example of how it happens. I had a friend back in high school, and he grew up in Texas. And when we would go to the store together, and we were going to buy a soda or pop, was it pop here in Ohio? They say pop, or they do say pop? Okay. He would go to the store to buy one of these, and he would say to me, what kind of Coke do you want? And this is back in like the 80s, when there wasn't New Coke, there wasn't Diet Coke, there wasn't Cherry Coke, there was just Coke. But in Texas, they say for Coke, for all different kinds of soda or pop. That one word describes everything. And the same kind of thing seems to have been going on in these medieval years of the church, medieval Latin, that word apple described all kinds of foreign fruit. And so we're maybe left wondering, apples come down to us in our Bible translations, we're maybe left wondering what fruit is being mentioned when it says apple in the Bible. We're going to explore that here for just a second. First, let's get something out of the way. There's an expression that comes up in the Bible that starts in Deuteronomy and goes through toward the end of the Old Testament. It occurs again and again, and it's the most common expression using apple in the Bible. And it is this. It talks about the apple of one's eye. The apple of one's eye, which means something that is really dear to you and precious to you. But if you read it in Hebrew, the original language the Old Testament was written, it doesn't say apple. I'm sorry. It doesn't say apple. It says little man. Literally, it's the little man of the eye. And what it's referring to is when you get up really close into someone's face and you're looking into their eye, you can see your own reflection in their eye. And it's a word about being dear to somebody. The apple of one's eye. That expression actually doesn't occur in the Bible. It's like an expression in English that we have that has made it into the history of translation. So there we throw out a whole cartload of apples mentioned in the Bible, just pointing out that one trouble with the translation. The second one is a little more helpful. It's a little more on point. And it's in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 11, where Solomon writes here, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. And some of the modern translations will have settings of silver. It's talking about something that looks kind of like jewelry, gold and silver. And what it's implying is that the fruit in mind here was not red, like most of our apples tend to be, but was actually more golden in color. And its leaves setting around it were more silvery in their appearance. So that maybe gets us thinking, what fruit could this be? What fruit looks more golden rather than red? But first we want to point out from Song of Solomon chapter 2, he talks about the taste of this fruit when you bite into it. And this fruit is sweet. And the tree is described as being large enough to cast shade. It was good to get under that tree and enjoy its shade. And that gives us a little bit more information about the tree that the Bible writers have in mind. I'm going to review for you. It looks golden. Its leaves look silvery. It's sweet to the taste, and it's good for providing shade. And some of the Bible scholars have suggested the following potential fruits that grow in that part of the world. One's called a citron. It's kind of like a lemon. Okay, it's got that color, yellowish color to its fruit. So that's a possibility, except when you bite into a citron, it tastes like a lemon. It doesn't taste sweet. It really doesn't fit. Another one they suggest is something called a quince, which is another one of these citrus fruits. And like the citron, when you bite into it, it's sour. It is not sweet. And the last possibility is the apple as we know it. Except that most of them tend to be red. And we know historically that the original apple from which all these other varieties of apples came from was actually red and not yellow or golden, like we have Golden Delicious. That's a new variety. So it fits as being